Yesterday then, on the official Crystal Dynamics Twitch account, we had the Hawkeye showcase stream. It was on for an hour. It showed off a fair amount. We got our first look, or our first proper gameplay look of the new biome, which is the Wasteland. You can actually see some gameplay of that there. It does look really nice. I love all the destroyed Sentinels that pop up throughout it. It's like Where's Wally, but with Sentinels. But we got a look at that. On top of that, we got a really in-depth look at the primary skill trees for Hawkeye, as well as a lot of modifiers for his heroics as well. Now, the section that went over his skills, it was probably about 20 or 30 minutes long, so there was quite a lot in there. So what I've actually done, I've went back over that footage again and I've captured all the important bits, I've captured all the tooltips, and we can run over them here and we can see them all without all the general chat that was going on with Twitch and so on, so it'll be a lot more streamlined when we check it out this way. Now, before we do jump in and have a look at it all, if you're enjoying the content, take the time to hit the like, share and subscribe button. Leave a comment below, exceptionally important for engagement on the channel. But let's jump in and let's check all this out. We start off here then looking at your light and heavy attacks when you actually charge them up, and where you have abilities that are linked, I'll put both the tooltips on the same screen and I'll describe them from left to right as well. So you've got Implosion Arrow first, signature attack, you hold down square, which is light attack, and you fire a specialised arrow that draws nearby combatants towards its epicentre. So Kate has her Singularity Arrow, which is our assault heroic, and Clint's essentially got a version of it that he can spam more often. It's obviously not as powerful because that would just be completely broken if it was the case, but he's got a version he can use. So this looks to be really nice. This one, you can see there's also instant implosion. This is where you can use it when you're in mid-air. Next up here we have the charged heavy attack. This one is called Split Shot Arrow. So with this, you hold down your heavy attack button, you fire an arrow, splits into multiple projectiles that seek out different targets. So I need to actually test and see if there's a single target, the fact that all the projectiles will be hitting them, how the damage actually scales on that. Next up we have your light combo finisher. We don't actually see the name of this one, the tooltip's cut off at the top here, but with this you're essentially spamming your light attack button. You perform a series of quick sword strikes that hit all enemies, and at the end you get your increased damage from your light combo finisher. Next up we have Suspension Arrow. This one actually looks really pretty amazing. It looks like it'll be tied in more with the melee side of things, and I'm going to run Hawkeye range, so that element is a little bit disappointing, but it still looks awesome. So with this you'll spam your light attack button, you finish off with a heavy attack, and then it launches targets into the air and deals continuous damage while keeping them suspended. So let's actually just watch the tooltip once more. Look at that. That looks really pretty awesome considering it's just a standard skill on him. This next ability here makes up for any disappointment I may have had over the fact that I'll very unlikely use the last ability, the more melee based one. So this is the ranged based one. So with this one here, you spam your heavy attack button after you've used your signature attack. Your signature attack is Implosion Arrow. That's when you hold down the light attack button. So with this, and this is classic Hawkeye, you fire out 3 different arrows. You've got your tripwire shot, your Pulsar Arrow, and then your split shot as well. So absolutely love this. Next up we have Cluster Arrows. This is very similar to Kate's Scatter Shot Arrows, but it looks like it could be more of a utility skill rather than a damage one. So if we look at the first modifier on the left, you hold down your left trigger to aim, right trigger to fire, and you fire 3 energized arrows in a tight cluster that stagger enemies and deal large amounts of stun damage. This will be used more often from a melee perspective, like a shotgun almost, close range. So you're hitting the enemy, you're staggering them, and then you can do a takedown on them. You have Tripwire Shot, which will be the one you'll use more from a ranged perspective. You charge it up. When it's fully charged, you fire 3 arrows with an energy tripwire running between them. The tripwire deals damage to anything it comes into contact with and is capable of knocking enemies off their feet. It looks decent enough. I really would have liked to see the fact that it's got that electricity that actually does something like shock damage, so we can start to get status in this kit, but later on we'll see there are lots of different ways you can actually get status anyway. The next ability we have here is Razor Arrows. So this is actually what Kate's got. You've got a little bit of a spin on it, but it is still very similar. So the first modifier is called Deadeye. With this one here, you hold down your right trigger to fully charge to enable the ability to mark an enemy target. The enemy that's targeted, the higher the targeting tier on them, up to a maximum of 2, but you can see the tooltip on the right allows you to take it up to 3. They'll take more damage and hit reaction severity. In theory it's a pretty nice skill, but on Kate the damage you could do by charging up her Razor Arrow wasn't even close to the damage you could do just by spamming the Scattershot Arrow, so I'm really hoping that this is scaling in a way that it'll be worthwhile to actually charge it up, because if you're standing still drawing your arrow for a longer period of time, then you really deserve to get some payoff as a result of that. You can see you've got the middle perk as well, where once again if you release it just as you get the little icon coming up on screen, you'll do more damage and you'll have a higher crit chance. So it looks like a decent ability, but I really need to see how it scales. The final arrow ability of the three that you can switch between is Pulsar Arrows, so very similar to Kate's Explosive Arrow. So you've essentially got your Scattershot, your Razor and your Explosive, so it is disappointing in that respect, there's slight tweaks to them, but when we look at other arrows he does have, I would say it more than makes up for it. But checking out this one here, so you hold down your left trigger, you'll press your light attack and you'll fire a Pulsar Arrow. It's essentially like an arrow that's got a timed detonator on it, and the longer it actually goes the bigger the explosion will be. With this one here, similar to the Razor Arrows on Kate, if you actually charge them and fire them, then you can pin an enemy to the wall, the same way Thor would do when he's actually using Mjolnir. And then finally you've got Neutron Blast at the end there, that if you detonate it when you see an icon come up on screen, then you'll do more damage. So pretty simple enough. Let's check out the next set. We then have a breakdown of what Clints Intrinsic will be. So it's Archer's Intrinsic, so with this you'll hold down your right trigger to concentrate and focus on enemy movements, allowing for automatic quick dodging of basic enemy attacks. It's essentially what Miss Marvel has. You hold it down and then you avoid your lighter attacks. You've also got on the right hand side here quick draw reflexes, so with this one if you press your right trigger to parry, you move out the way and you fire an arrow at the attacker. So again that's pretty standard stuff. We then have two abilities you can use after parrying an attack. So the first one is Startling Disruption, which is your light attack. So with this you jam a Disruptor arrow into them, which applies a disruption debuff. That was something Kate has, but this one looks to be different from the tooltip. It says the debuff increases critical attack chance for all ranged attacks against the target by 25% and lasts for 6 seconds. So again that would be great on a melee build. And then you've got Rocket Arrow here if you use the heavy attack after parrying. Now it does say some enemies are immune to the knockback effect, but I'm hoping you can still Shrink Abomination and Taskmaster and use this to fire them off the roof, because that would look pretty awesome. We then have the trusty Boomerang Arrow next. This is your light intrinsic attack, so you can hold down the right trigger to actually dodge enemies, or you can hold it down to do attacks as well. So with this, if you press the light attack button when holding it down, you fire an arrow that travels an arc, hitting any enemies in its path before returning. You've then got Aerodynamic Finesse, so with this one if you continue to hold it down and press light attack just as it comes back, then you'll throw it out again and it ricochets between multiple enemies. So it's pretty nice to see they did manage to get this in there. Final ability we have before we move on to the heroics is Swordsman's Prodigy. So this is your heavy intrinsic attack, so you hold down your right trigger and then you press your heavy attack to fire a grapple arrow at the target, quickly zipping towards them and attacking them with a powerful sword slash. So for your players that are playing melee side of things, this is a great way of closing the gap and getting straight in an enemy's face. So let's now check out the heroics. We start off then with some gameplay of the support heroic. This is Recovery Arrow. It gives me some very heavy Marvel Heroes vibes, so that's really pretty awesome. And then in a second we've actually got, I think it's all the perks for it as well. But if you look at the left hand side first, you'll see when he fires it at the ground. So you can't actually choose to fire it at a distant target. The developers were saying that when people were testing this, they were actually missing the target and it was zipping past them and being wasted. So that's why you fire it at the ground. You've got a modifier here called Nanite Shield. With this one, Nanobots provide heroes with a defensive buff that absorbs 20% of incoming damage and reduces the impact of enemy attacks as well. When it comes to showing off the perks then, I've laid them out the way they would actually show. So on the left hand side there would be 3 perks you would select. We've already showed the Nanite Shield in the last one, that's why we don't have the tooltip here. The middle ones are ones that you'll get automatically, and then the right hand side, once again, you need to pick one of the 3. So to run through the left hand side, you've got Critical Care. Heroes affected by the nanobots have a 20% increased critical hit chance and 20% weak point and critical attack damage. And then you've got Field Medic, extends the duration of nanobots, so it can operate by a further 5 seconds, that takes up to 15 in total. The middle one, and as mentioned, both of these you will be getting. You've got Good to Go. Nanobots remove and prevent all status effects from affecting heroes whilst they're providing recovery. That alongside Field Medic could be really powerful in potential content we might get further down the road where the enemies are crowd controlling you a lot. Also with this you get guaranteed extended recovery. So this extends the nanobot dispersal range by 50%. On the right hand side you have to pick one out of the three. You've got strong medicine, increases the initial amount of willpower recovered by 75% and the amount recovered over time by 100. You've got intrinsic gifts, so this one here, enemies defeated within the nanobot swarm area have a 60% chance to drop an intrinsic orb, and then heroic recharge, enemies defeated within the nanobot swarm area have a 30% chance to drop a heroic orb. So some interesting modifiers there. Let's now have a look at the next heroic. Next up we have the Assault Heroic here. It's a very typical ability for an archer, but it looks to be really nice. It's Nightstorm Arrow. So with this you hold down your right bumper to target a bombardment zone, then you release right bumper to fire an arrow that rains down multiple explosive projectiles over the designated area. Now earlier on I talked about some abilities that were missing status effects. It was a little bit disappointing, but when we look at the modifiers in this section here, it more than makes up for it. So here's the three options you have here, and they all look really pretty amazing. So starting on the left here we have Fire Devil. So with this one you'll be creating your plasma status on enemies. It also launches them up in there as well. It's like a fire tornado essentially. Then you have Ion Surge, so you're calling down lightning and that will do your shock damage. And then you have Hailstorm and that will do your crowd damage. So I really like the look of this. Now let's have a look at the perks that will be available. So we've already looked at the first three modifiers a moment ago. That's the one with the different elements. You'll pick one of those three. The first two we look at here on the left, you'll get them once you actually put the points into them, guaranteed. So it's Storm Shadow, store a second charge for Nightstorm Arrow. I'm really hoping via gear we get the choice to get a third charge because it looks like an awesome ability. And then you've got Sunny Aftermath, enemies defeated by the Nightstorm Arrow have a 10% chance to drop a heroic orb. We have Strike Point next, increase the status build up for all damage dealt by the Nightstorm Arrow by 30%. If one arrow doesn't actually build up the status full enough, then this is what I'll probably be speccing into, so I can build up the status with these arrows and then use an opposite status on my main attacks. But the next one is Fallen Sky, increase the duration of the Nightstorm Arrow's effect, dealing additional damage to enemies inside the bombardment zone. And then Fatal Domain, increase the size of the bombardment zone by 50%. So that's the Assault Heroic, looks pretty amazing. Let's have a look at the final one now. This is the Ultimate Heroic. For the Ultimate Heroic then, we have Hunter's Arrow. So with this one here, when you activate it, you fire an AI driven smart arrow, seeks out targets and deals large amount of damage as it pierces through them. The Hunter's Arrow can target up to 10 times before running out of energy. Now we've actually got quite a lot of other clips for the perks, so let's have a look at them. The three different perks we have gameplay of, then they come from the left hand side tree, so you will need to pick one of these. The first one is Marked Prey, so the Hunter's Arrow will prioritise the currently targeted enemy, allowing for concentrated damage against a specific target, and that's really nice. When I first seen this ability, I was just really hoping there would be an option that if you want to whittle down a boss or an elite, you can do it, and that's what this perk would allow. We have Dive Bomb next, so the Hunter's Arrow attaches an explosive charge each time it hits an enemy. Shooting the enemy or hitting them with a melee attack will detonate the charge. That'll be more for your melee builds, but as mentioned you can shoot them as well to detonate it. And then finally we have Twin Talons. With this you fire two Hunter's Arrows charged with electricity, increasing the overall damage dealt and applying shock damage to all affected targets. So that'll be better for taking out mobs, whereas your first one, Marked Prey, will be better for taking out bosses. So I like that there's various different options available here. So we've already looked at the three perks that are on the left hand side, the ones we looked at just a second ago. So the two we see here at the left are two that you'll get guaranteed. You've got Broken Wing, so with this, triggering the Hunter's Arrow while overcharged increases the maximum number of targets to 20, that's actually a whopping amount, and creates an explosive force and impact that staggers nearby enemies. We then have Enduring Flight. This one here, the Hunter's Arrow can now hit a maximum of 15 targets before running out of energy. Looking at the right hand side, you need to pick one of these three. You've got Bird in the Hand. Enemies defeated by the Hunter's Arrow have a 25% chance to drop a heroic orb. That could work really nice if you're targeting 20 different enemies actually. And then Hunter's Resolve, recover 5% willpower each time the Hunter's Arrow hits an enemy. Not really a fan of that at all. Hawk's Cry, the Hunter's Arrow taunts enemies it hits, drawing aggro away from nearby strike team members. That's really pretty crazy because I've not seen anything in his kit that really gives him a nice amount of survivability. I suppose you do have the Medic-Arrow, that's what I'm always going to call it, just thinking of Marvel heroes. You do have that, but even still, pretty strange to see Hawkeye taunting. But that's everything we managed to get from the stream. Overall, looks really nice. It's slightly disappointing in the respect that the 3 core arrows you'll go through are very similar to Kate's. They're just really twists on what she's got. But looking at everything else, there's some pretty awesome options in there, and it's actually got me a bit excited about the game again. So let me know what you think about all this in the comments below, and thanks for tuning in. Stay safe, and I'll see you all again soon.